imagine that your loved one, your sister, your niece, your auntie, in fact, any female that is close to you is being constantly abused and tortured by her partner. Then he proceeds to take her life in a very violent manner, and then he positions her carefully on the couch as if she was still alive so her kids will not think otherwise, while they happily open their Christmas presents in front of their propped up mother. On Christmas morning in the year 2011, Za'zell Preston is sitting on the couch in the living room of her home, putting on sunglasses, while her husband sits close by as they both watch their children open up their Christmas presents. Just a little bit over a month earlier, Za'zell had given birth to a beautiful baby boy who was soundly asleep that morning. By 9:30 a.m., a call will be made to 911, and when first responders arrived, they quickly discovered that Za'zell, who was seated on the couch watching as her kids opened their presents, was in fact a corpse. These are some of the details of the sick case we're talking about today. Hello and welcome to my channel. Please consider subscribing and give this video a thumbs up as we look into this case of Za'zell Preston. Za'zell was a 26-year-old beautiful black woman living in Anaheim, California. Born in Orange County, California on September the 5th, 1985, she grew up to become a super talented girl, even becoming a painter at some point. Very outgoing and very friendly, Za'zell was loved by people who knew her. She at a point became a ballet dancer. Dancing was something that she loved doing, and she thought that in the future she could really maybe go professional with it, but all that dream came to a screeching halt when she found out that she was pregnant at only 17 years old while she was still a student at high school. Za'zell had her baby girl. Her family supported her through it all. Still determined to succeed in life, Za'zell tried to get into modeling. She wanted to do something. She wanted to make money. That too only lasted for a bit because she again got pregnant and had another baby girl. But this time, her relationship with her then boyfriend was already suffering. So by 2008, they both went their separate ways. Za'zell took care of her daughters as a single mother for a while. Her family all the time were right there by her side, trying to give her a helping hand whenever she needed one. Fast forward to when she turned 25, Za'zell met 27-year-old William Wallace. When the two met, William Wallace was so smitten with Za'zell, and she too was, happy to be in a relationship with him. She was tired of being alone. Aside, Williams, who seemed to be a good fit and a father figure to her girls, she felt lucky to have him in her life and the girls' life as well. She thought that she had found a good man, a great father figure, a lover and a friend, someone who would, take care of her and love her for who she was. But was Za'zell right about Wallace? Considering what he did to her and how he treated her throughout their relationship, Wallace was in no way remotely close to being a decent human being. Right from the beginning of the relationship, Za'zell's mother and grandmother felt like William Wallace was just too possessive and controlling. He wanted to be in charge of Za'zell's life right from the beginning when they began dating, so they knew he was no good for Za'zell at all. Meanwhile, Za'zell at this point was still trying to pursue her modeling career, but Wallace would not let her. He complained basically about everything, about the way she dressed and her group of friends that she was hanging out with. He was just so very jealous and manipulative. He was a very cunning man, and he constantly cheated on Za'zell as well. And whenever he was confronted, he would claim that women were the ones pursuing him for affairs. All this was happening, and Za'zell's family wanted her to cut Wallace up, but it didn't work that way. She went ahead to marry him. So Za'zell was now married to William Wallace, and together they had a beautiful baby boy. That means that Wallace was now a stepfather to Za'zell's two girls from her previous relationship. And now William Wallace graduated from not only cheating on Za'zell but also beating the crap out of her. Even during their wedding reception on November the 7th of 2011, he got drunk and attacked Za'zell, beating her unconscious on her wedding day. And this just continued afterwards. Each time he beat her, he would then come back to bed, and she would gladly take him back. It was so scary what this man was doing to Za'zell that her family asked her again to leave. And she did leave him on several occasions, but this man would come crawling and begging and she would take him back again. Za'zell was a very driven woman, like I mentioned earlier. She wanted a better life for herself and her children as well. So even before getting pregnant for her last child, she thought of, going back to school, and she enrolled in Cypress College and started taking classes towards someday becoming a domestic violence guidance counselor. Something that was inspired by her own story, because Za'zell was in a very abusive, toxic and tumultuous marriage. She was studying what she knew very, very well. And Wallace was not happy about Za'zell returning back to college at all. He just wasn't comfortable with being back at home and looking after the kids while Za'zell was back at school studying. There was a lot of ups and downs in their relationship, between Za'zell and Wallace. There was a lot that was going on, as he constantly cheated on her and he beat her uncountable times and numerous times. On Za'zell's social media, she would post pictures of her and Wallace all lovey-dovey today. Then the very next day, she would be ranting about how big of a cheat he was and cussing out numerous women whom she believed her husband was cheating with. It was just a roller coaster of uncertainties for this couple, and Za'zell's family begged her again and again to leave this toxic situation of a relationship. But just like in most cases of women who are being abused, Za'zell felt very stuck in that relationship. But she sought help from a couple of other domestic violence survivors. In the process, she met this woman called Laurie Galloway, a woman who took Za'zell under her wings. She was an official for the Eli Home, which is like a sanctuary for abused women and children. Laurie Galloway advised Za'zell to leave Williams, and this was something that she was considering doing before this man snuffed the life out of her, even before she got the chance to do so. For over a decade, Wallace had been beating Za'zell, getting her hospitalized on numerous occasions at this point, with severe injuries of course. There was a time he beat her within an inch of her life. Her family was very furious with the situation and they asked her again to leave him, but Za'zell still remained back. Wallace was an angry and manipulative and a very violent man. He didn't care how badly he hurt his wife. When Za'zell fell pregnant for her son, she hoped and she prayed. Even her family members and friends thought that with a new baby on the way, Wallace would change and turn a new leaf and learn to treat her right. But no, it didn't work out that way. He beat her well into her third trimester. On one occasion, Za'zell was found coiled up on the street after wandering about for a while because she was confused and dazed after receiving a serious hit to the head during one of the attacks on her by Wallace. To think that she was even heavily pregnant when he beat her into losing her memory temporarily just shows how sick of an individual that he was. Thank goodness that her family member came visiting and found her clueless and just laying there in the open in a fetal position on the streets. Wallace was gradually dimming Za'zell's light at this point. She was no longer allowed to do those things that she loved, those things that made her who she was. Her modeling, her dancing, and her painting. She was now just a shadow of herself and a punching bag for Wallace. Ultimately, Wallace beat Za'zell into having an early labor. He kicked her in the stomach that night of their wedding when she was heavily pregnant, and she had to be rushed to the hospital where she ended up giving birth to her baby boy. That was what happened that night. That was how she gave birth to her son. Wallace was not the type of person that was expected to change. This man had been to jail before. He was arrested and had been sent to jail for attacking Za'zell, not just one time. He had also done time for other domestic attacks before, but each time he got out of jail, his next stop would be Za'zell's place, and she would again and again willingly take him in. He knew he had a very strong hold on her. That's why he always came crawling back each time, and she would forgive him. In 2011, Wallace was back in prison for the same offense, and Za'zell's family thought that this time it would be the end to the relationship. But by that summer, he was out and back in Za'zell's life and nothing had changed about him basically. He was still jealous and controlling and angry. The smallest interaction between Za'zell and another man would set Wallace off. At Thanksgiving dinner at Za'zell's grandma's home on November the 24th, 2011, he became angry when Za'zell asked her sister's husband to show her something on his cell phone. It was just a harmless conversation. He looked like, he was going to tear Za'zell into pieces. He was very, very enraged. She became so scared that she didn't want to go back home with him. She said to her grandma, quote, "If I was, it would be better for everyone." The way Za'zell figured this out was that if her husband took her life, he would go to prison for the rest of his life and her 3 children would then be taken care of by her relatives. It was almost like Za'zell was seeing the future because 4 weeks later, that Christmas, things would take a turn for the worse, as this time Za'zell would not survive the beating that she got from Wallace. On Christmas Eve 2011, Za'zell and Wallace were heard arguing. There was serious noise coming from their apartment, bangings on the walls and numerous sounds of crashes. Neighbors heard them yelling and screaming at each other. Okay, so at this point, it's not difficult to figure out how badly these constant arguments and beatings had affected the kids. If neighbors could hear and even see them so clearly, how much more the kids who lived with them? It's so sad, the situations that some people put their kids into. These are the type of issues that affect people's mental health in the long run. So, neighbors heard them, in that fight. This particular fight started after the two had returned from a Christmas party at one of their neighbors' home. No one knows exactly what they were arguing about, but it went on for so long that later that Christmas Eve, neighbors said that they saw Wallace drag Za'zell into their home, like literally drag her back in while she was trying to flee the home. I don't know why they didn't call the cops, but you see, sometimes things like this happen too often, and even neighbors or people around who are supposed to help get used to it, and it becomes like a normal occurrence to them. Inside, the fight continued and Wallace lifted Za'zell up and sent her crashing into a glass table, shattering it into pieces, with some of the shards even sticking to her body. Za'zell, as soon as she landed, lost consciousness immediately, and Wallace called her daughter, who was only 8 years old at the time, to help him to carry her upstairs to the bathroom. In the bathroom, Wallace dropped Za'zell again and she hit her head on the toilet, causing her more injury to the head. Wallace asked the young girl to remove the shards of glass from her mother's body and clean her up, after which Wallace again moves her to the bedroom with the help of their 8-year-old. To him, it was just another day and another fight where he will beat her black and blue and she will recover from her injuries only to be beaten again, and then the cycle just continues basically. But sadly, Za'zell never recovered from this one. That night, shortly before Christmas, she gave up the ghost. Wallace, when he saw that Za'zell had passed away, began to think of how to cover up his tracks. He thought long and hard, and the only sick solution he could come up with was to call the kids together and tell them that Mommy had ruined Christmas because Mommy was drunk. Wallace didn't stop there. He drags Za'zell's body to the living room, props it up on the couch in a lifelike position, and puts a pair of dark sunglasses on her to make it look like she was still alive but too drunk to function. How disturbing was this? Za'zell's children believed Wallace. They were just kids themselves, aged 3 and 8. It was Christmas morning and they were excited about opening their presents while Daddy and Mommy watched. So they proceeded to open their presents happily as Daddy and Mommy watched, not knowing that Mommy was not alive. After this, they thanked both Daddy and Mommy, to which Za'zell didn't respond, but Wallace said for them not to worry, that Mommy was just too drunk to talk. The older daughter, the 8-year-old, did notice her mother was cold to touch when she went to give her a hug, but she was too young to understand what that meant. I am not sure what it was, but sometime around 9:30 that morning, something prompted Wallace to call 911. Maybe he just didn't know what else to do with the body, or maybe there was, a hint of guilty conscience, maybe. I don't know, but he called the police and said that his wife needed medical attention, not that she was deceased. He said she needed medical attention. That was all he told the cops. Shortly after that call was made, first responders arrived at the home. Paramedics who were not sure the type of medical attention that Za'zell needed arrived to give her help, but What they saw as they entered the home was kind of confusing to them. The person who was said to have needed medical attention was seated quietly on the couch with sunshades on. They tried to talk to her like, "Ma'am, how can we help you? How are you feeling?" But Za'zell was not talking back. Soon enough, they quickly realized that she was in fact not alive, and she hadn't been alive for quite some time. So they called the cops, and Wallace was arrested immediately, and he was put behind bars while waiting his bail hearing. His bail was later on set at $1 million, and then the legal battles began. Wallace's attorney in his defense said that whatever happened to Za'zell was an accident, that she was so drunk and she fell on the glass table, shattering it and getting injured in the process. But this argument didn't hold water, as a police search of the apartment had revealed red vital body fluids all over the apartment, just smeared all over the apartment. That shows something had violently happened in that house, coupled with multiple holes that were obviously from human feet in the dry walls of the apartment. There was no telling what had happened there. Smashed glasses, holes in the walls, knocked off doors and splatters all around. It was very telling, you know. Even if it were to be true that Za'zell fell on accident, why didn't Wallace call emergency services for help? Why enlist the help of a mere 8-year-old child to carry her mother from room to room? He said Za'zell fell by accident, but he told his own family members that she had in fact attacked him and he did nothing to defend himself, that it was while she was in this furious rage that she fell and hit her head in the process. The lies. Za'zell's family, on the other hand, were really heartbroken and they were furious at Wallace for doing what he did to their daughter Za'zell. They saw it coming for a while. I mean, for years he had been abusing her, for 2 years if not more. But no one would ever be prepared for such a tragedy as this, even if you knew that it was going to come someday. They told the police all they knew about the toxic and abusive union. Her family told the story of how at one point Za'zell hid in the toilet of a convenience store to call the police while she was trying to hide away from Wallace. Her grandmother was the one who came to get her from that toilet. They basically told the police how psychopathic Wallace was. Wallace at his trial acted like he hadn't done anything. Maybe he thought that this was going to be like in previous situations where he would do some little time in jail and get out to continue all his shenanigans. He said he was just drunk and had tossed and dragged Za'zell about a bit. What does that even mean? Who drags a full-grown adult, a full-grown woman about, or tosses her around like she's some piece of rag or toy to play with? But this man presented it like it was a normal thing to show you how often he did this to Za'zell and how delusional he was. He said that he knew Za'zell had hit her head and he knew she had passed away at some point, but that whole staging situation is just too bizarre for me to understand. This case reminds me of Karabo Mokwena's case from South Africa. I will link it for you at the end of the video so you can see how Karabo Mokwena advocated for abused women but could not get herself out of an abusive relationship until her partner took her life and burnt her remains. It was a very sad situation. While other testimonies were heard, including that of the woman from Eli's home, that's Laurel Galloway, who said that Za'zell was planning to leave Wallace for good at the time he took her life, of course. But from here on, the case became very complicated as the only witnesses to the crime were young children. So it dragged on for years until the year 2021. In the meantime, the funeral for Za'zellpreston was held at Gospel Light Church of God in Christ in Santa Ana, California, and she was laid to rest afterwards. Now, in 2021, Za'zell's 8-year-old was now grown and she was able to give testimonies on what had happened to her mother on that Christmas night and many nights before when her stepfather beat the life out of her mother. Za'zell's family told how Wallace was sending threats to her in the days leading up to her demise. He was telling her that he was going to take her life. Neighbors also gave their own accounts of what they had heard and what they had witnessed on that Christmas Eve. One neighbor said that they saw Wallace picking up what appeared to be a body by their apartment gate, which basically means that at some point Za'zell did escape and got as far as the apartment gate before she was caught and taken back into the apartment to be beaten some more. Even after all the testimonies and evidences, Wallace's attorney tried to say that even though her client and Za'zell fought a lot, they still loved each other. Imagine Heather Moorhead said, quote, Mr. Wallace has been accused of something that is not his fault. You will hear about a relationship that was full of arguing and yelling, but also a lot of love, end quote. Would she have said it if she was the one that was being abused, or if it were to be her loved one who was being abused like this? I don't think so. Fast forward to May 2021, William Wallace was convicted of second-degree murder and he was sentenced to 15 years to life. I hope he spends the rest of his life locked up. Just like Za'zell predicted, her kids were raised by her family and they were well taken care of, while Wallace wallows in jail. So that's it for today's case, guys. Remember, you can always get out of an abusive relationship, even if it seems like you wouldn't be able to survive all by yourself. You are better off alive than 6 feet under. Do it for yourself and for the people who love you. Thank you for watching till the very end. Please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video.